Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. Wa sallallahu wa sallam ala nabiyyina Muhammad wa ala alihi wa sahbihi wa sallam amma ba'd. Yawm Ashura. Yawm Ashura is the day of the 10th. And this is on the Islamic calendar. This corresponds with the final month, Hijri, on the Hijra calendar, which is the Islamic calendar. It's the final month on that calendar before a new year begins. And the 10th day during that month, which is Muharram, that's the name of the month, Muharram, Shahr Muharram. And this holy month, which is the last month on the Islamic calendar, the 10th day of that is known as Yawm Ashura. And it is a time for Muslims for whoever wishes to gain extra reward from their Lord subhanahu wa ta'ala to fast on this day. And the ways in which we fast are mentioned in the hadith of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. The way that we, for the correct manners and ways in which we fast to seek the reward of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala are prescribed in the sunnah of the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And as was mentioned in a hadith, just to talk about some of the benefits, in the hadith of Abi Qatada radiyallahu anhu, عن النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم قال: صيام يوم عاشوراء احتسب على الله أن يكفر السنة التي قبله. And this was related in I believe in Bukhari and Muslim. And there's many hadiths in Bukhari and Muslim to substantiate this, and we'll come across some of them. We'll read some of them very shortly. So in this hadith of Abi Qatada, where the Prophet ﷺ said, fasting the day of Ashura, that the person will receive a reward from Allah of the expiation of all of his sins on which he did during the previous year. So this shows us the greatness of fasting during Ashura, that there is great reward for doing this recommended deed. And this is not an obligatory fast, but this is something that is recommended in Islam. And in regards to that, Yawm Ashura was at one time before, it was legislated before Ramadan as an obligatory fast, before Ramadan became obligatory in the advent of Islam, in the early stages of the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, his prophethood. But as revelation was revealed, it changed in its status and it became something that was recommended. And the ways in which we fast this day, as our Sheikh mentions, Hafidhullah Ta'ala, Sheikh Ibrahim al-Rahili, Hafidhullah Ta'ala, he says, وَالصِّيَامُهُ مَرْتَبَتَانِ. He said, and fasting it has two different levels. It has two different levels and basically two different ways in which we fast. أَكْمَلُهُمَا, the most perfect or the best way in which to fast this Yawm Ashura, أن يصام التاسع والعاشر وعليه أكثر الأحاديث. He said it is to fast the 9th and the 10th, and this is what most of the hadith regarding this act of worship mention, that you should fast the 9th and the 10th. And this corresponding on the Islamic calendar, in which today is the 9th of Muharram, so today is the 9th, and tomorrow will be the 10th of Ashura. It will be the 10th of Muharram, and it will be another day in which to fast to receive great reward from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So the best way to get the most reward and to follow this sunnah in the most complete fashion will be to fast on the 9th and the 10th. And this is what most of the ahadith show. Then the Shaykh went on to say, حفظ الله تعالى وقال وثانية إفراد العشر بصوم ذكرهما ابن قيم رحمه الله. So the Shaykh said, and the second way in which we fast is that to single out the 10th with fasting. And this was mentioned, both of these were mentioned by Ibn Qayyim rahimahullah ta'ala. And then the Shaykh وقال الشيخ وذكر المرتبة ثالثة وهي صيام يوم قبله ويوم بعده ولم يثبت بهذا الدليل صحيح. The Shaykh went on to say, also it was mentioned, I believe Ibn Qayyim mentioned a third way in which you could fast for Yawm Ashura, and he said that it is to fast the day before it, meaning the 9th, and the day after it, so it would be the 11th. But the Shaykh went on to say, but there isn't anything mentioned authentic from the hadiths substantiating doing it in that fashion. So as we learned, that the best way to do it is to fast the 9th and the 10th. Then the Shaykh went on to say, حفظ الله تعالى ولا يشرع في يوم عاشوراء إظهار الشيء من شعائر الفرح. So there's nothing mentioned from the ahadiths of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam regarding this, that these are particularly times of celebration and happiness, and that a person should not do things like spending extra money on their children and giving gifts or anything like this. There's nothing mentioned from the Sunnah of the Prophet ﷺ, and this would be something best reserved for the Eids, for the two Eid festivals after Ramadan, the end of Ramadan, Eid al-Fitr and Eid al-Adha. It is best reserved. Those are times for more for celebrations in Islam. However, Yawm Ashura, we should also not display sadness and, people crying and great sadness, and due to the events that happened, that Hussein, one of the grandchildren of the Prophet ﷺ, he was martyred on this day, and this is what you find the Shia, the Rafida, in particular, and some of the other Shia sects, that they celebrate this martyrdom in the similar fashion, the way the Christians celebrate the Christmas what they claim to be the resurrection of Jesus, alayhi salatu wasalam, that they have celebrations in which they perform, and you'll find this practice, this un-Islamic practice, advertised all throughout, being practiced in places like Iran and Iraq, where you find people beating themselves, cutting their children, and bleeding, crying, women screaming and crying, pulling out their hair, tearing off their clothes. And no sane individual would consider that a festival of worship or an act of worship. And in Bab al-Awla, or in the first and foremost, and especially in Islam, this has nothing to do as an Islamic practice. So the people should not be misled, and I just wanted to clarify that, because it's very important, because that's what the Shia sect do, but they have no evidence for these terrible, terrible things that they're doing. These things go against Islam, and they give a bad picture of Islam, because Islam doesn't cause you to, as the Prophet ﷺ said, la darar wa la dirar, or la darar wa la dirar. The Prophet ﷺ said, that there is no harming and there is no causing harm. So Islam doesn't teach us to harm ourselves or harm other individuals. And that would, of course, in celebrating or in something being an act of worship, even more so, you would find that, no, this goes against Islamic practices. So we do not believe in cutting ourselves and beating and cutting our children, tearing off our clothes and crying and screaming and pulling out our hair, as the Shia do. And in this regard, Shaykh al-Islam Ibn Taymiyyah, rahimahullah ta'ala, he said, وَلَمْ يُسُنَّ رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم ولا خلفاؤه الراشدون في يوم عاشوراء شيء من هذه الأمور. He said that the Prophet صلى الله عليه وسلم, the Messenger of Allah, Muhammad ibn Abdullah صلى الله عليه وسلم, and his four rightly guided khulafa, meaning the first caliphs, Abu Bakr, Umar, Uthman, Ali, radiallahu anhum ajma'in, none of them practice these practices. That none of this comes from any of their practices. لا شعائر الحزن ولا ترح. And there is no signs of, there should be no displays of being sad or having grief. ولا شعائر ولا سرور ولا فرح. And there should also be no signs of great happiness or celebrations. And then the Shaykh went on to say, rahimahullah ta'ala, Shaykh al-Islam Ibn Taymiyyah, ولكنه صلى الله عليه وسلم لما قدم المدينة وجد اليهود تصوم عاشوراء فقال ما هذا؟ فقالوا هذا يوم نجي الله فيه موسى من الغرق فنحن نصومه. فقال نحن أحق بموسى منكم فصامه وأمر بصيامه. So in this, Shaykh al-Islam Ibn Taymiyyah said that when the Prophet ﷺ went to Medina, that he saw the Jews were fasting this day, the 10th of Muharram. I mean the 10th of Muharram, now Ashura. And he said, what is this? They replied, this is the day that Allah saved Moses, alayhi salatu wasalam, from the drowning, in which Fir'aun was drowned, and Moses and his people were saved. So we fast this day. The Jews, this was a practice, the Jews, they fasted this day for this reason. Then the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ said, we have more right to Musa or Moses than you, because we follow the way of Moses and the way of all the prophets and messengers. And the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ was the last prophet and messenger, and his sunnah is the way in which we are ordered to follow. So he said, we have more right to Moses than you do. So then he ordered the people to fast, and he fasted it himself, sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And this was collected in, this was mentioned, this hadith was mentioned, I believe, in Bukhari and Muslim. And so this shows us some of the importance and some of the background behind this very important day, Yom Ashura. And in another sitting, we will sit and we will mention some of the ahadith related to this. Wa sallallahu wa sallam ala nabiyyina Muhammad.